Awesome. Hi, guys. I'm Tara. I took Rad's seminar, and my unit is all about the novel Things Fall Apart. So here is a beautifully staged photograph collage of my students finishing Chinua Achebe's African novel Things Fall Apart, and they're trying very hard to show you how shocked and frustrated they are. So first, let me tell you why they are frustrated. Every year, I see students struggle with the content in terms of just familiarizing themselves with a new culture. Students commit to understand the main character Okonkwo and his tribe's customs and culture. Through this commitment of understanding a new world, they struggle and feel uncomfortable. However, they find their bearings and come to sympathize with certain characters and with Umuafian society. And every year I see my students get to the end of the book, experiencing the irony of spending all this time trying to understand this new world, feeling every bit of the productive struggle, only to have their hard work completely invalidated through the district commissioner, a white colonizer who comes in at the end of the novel and decides that he could, quote, almost write a whole chapter on Okonkwo, perhaps not a whole chapter, but a reasonable paragraph, end quote, and will title his book The Pacification of the Primitive Tribes of the Lower Niger. How dare this brand new character come in at the end of the novel and say Okonkwo is only worth a paragraph after we read a whole novel about him and his tribe? And how dare he call this sophisticated, beautiful society primitive? It's at this moment that my students finally understand the feelings of the colonized, and this reinforces the idea that history is always written by the victors and single stories exist. After many years of teaching this novel and seeing their frustrations, I wanted to introduce contemporary Black art to help combat this frustration, to show students how artists are reclaiming and rethinking traditional colonial history and commenting on their post-colonial frustration. So this is where Rod came in. He introduced me to artists like Kehinde Wiley, Yinka Shonibari, and Hugh Locke. These artists are doing a similar service as Achebe did with his novel, dispelling narratives written by colonizers or white oppressors and reframing perspective to give back power to the colonized or oppressed. As detailed in my curriculum unit, we did a close reading of the text, some art analysis, and class writing, and a culminating activity where I had students create a fictional portrait that fuses Achebe's text and the styles of the artist studied to do the very same thing for the fictional world of Umuafia, decolonizing the narrative and putting it all back together. So here's an example of the activities I did. I showed my class the side-by-side comparisons of Wiley's work with the original. I give students the background on Wiley and the purpose of his work. Wiley would street cast young men from Harlem. Together, they would pick out an old master's painting from the textbook, and then Wiley would paint large-scale portraits of these strong urban Black men, mimicking the stance and power of the original. By juxtaposing the works, we discuss the differences of the paintings, compare and contrast the works, decipher Wiley's true purpose, and then connect back to the novel. So here's my cute little 6th hour examining the paintings. Together, we created a tri-columned chart. I first had them call out details they saw from the painting and any vibes or adjectives they got from the works. The kids pointed out some cool things that I never thought of while writing the unit. They questioned why Wiley why Wiley switched out the baton in the original, which they said suggests abuse, with the sword, and came to the conclusion that the sword represents how Black men in today's society have to defend themselves more. Next, they got to use all their notes they took from doing these types of charts for all the works we examined, and now use them for in-class synthesis writing. The prompt for this is, using textual and visual evidence, what comparisons can you make in theme or main ideas between Things Fall Apart and one or two of the works by Wiley, Shonibari, and Locke, and how does this connect to the author's purpose? Here, you'll see how my students were successfully able to synthesize the work's major themes and ideas. One student made a connection that Achebe's novel shows us how the white colonizer rewrites the narrative, and how Wiley's work gives representation to previously silenced voices and tries to rewrite history. The student on the right compares Things Fall Apart to both Wiley and Shonibari's work. The top example here is a strong thesis statement discussing how both Achebe and Wiley's work criticize the devaluing of African and Black culture. And the bottom example shows a comparison a student makes to the black clouds in Wiley's painting to the cloud of locusts arriving in Umafia, both symbolizing the destruction of Black and African culture. So the final project, which is not technically due yet, so I bribed a few students to complete it early, so I had something to show you. So I had students, through photography, tracing, or some other mode of art, create portraits of Okonkwo or their favorite Igbo characters inspired by the artists used in this unit, giving Okonkwo and Igbo power back from the European invaders. I had them use quotes from the novel that highlight the beauty, power, and value of this culture for the portrait's background, which ties together the power of the written text and the visual image. But again, by using portraiture for this final project, students got to choose a character whose power had been stripped away from them by the colonizer and to bring that humanity and power back, just as the 3 artists we studied do in their own work. The feedback I received from students has been overwhelmingly good. Students felt empowered to constructively fight against systems of power and understand the importance of the many stories and many perspectives that make up our world.